Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Green Apple Books on the Park. My name is Car Johnson. I'm the event coordinator for Green Apple, and tonight I am very happy to be with you to celebrate Sezin Devi
Koehler.
Gosh, so sorry, Sezin.
Okay.
Sezin Devi Koehler's book, Much Ado About Keanu, A Critical Reeves Theory. Let's give a hand for Sezin. Sezin is joined tonight by Shanthi Sekaran. Let's give a hand for Shanthi as well. Excellent. Thank you all so much for joining us. This is fun. We're going to have a good time. I'm very excited about it. As you can tell by Sezin's outfit, we're going to have a good time this evening. Thank you all for joining us in person. Thank you for joining us online. Hello, online audience. Waving to the camera. Can't see it. We are broadcasting from San Francisco. We open each of our events with a land acknowledgement, and as such, I would like to let you know that we are operating on unceded Ramaytush Ohlone land. We think that acknowledgement requires action, and so we encourage you to donate either your time or monetary means to an Indigenous organization each time you hear a land acknowledgement. We have details specifically about the Ramaytush Ohlone Land Trust at the back desk if you are interested in how to participate in this project of rematriation. I have very brief business before I let these two take over. Now is a good time to silence your cell phones if you have not already. We ask that you not take a call in the middle of the event, but I have been told that picture taking is fine, encouraged even. So please do, if you feel the impulse, take photos. You're welcome to. And the only rule being that you can't take bad photos. No bad photos. No bad photos allowed. Please do check out our full event calendar online at greenapplebooks.com. We have a really great season ahead of us. We're closing out April strong this evening. We're jumping right into May, so check out what we have. Please do buy books if you are able. We always appreciate it. And tonight we actually, in addition to books, we also have some special Keanu merch that we have available here. If you're looking to add a Point Break poster to your home, then we can provide that for you. We also have some fun lighters and stickers should you need those things. We got into it, so those are available. If you've been here before, you've certainly heard me say that when you buy books from us, not only do you support us as an independent bookstore, you support the writers who put so much work into making these books, and then you get to have a book, which might be the best part. So if you're able, we always appreciate that. Thank you so kindly. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the two authors who are joining us tonight. First, Shanthi Sekaran is a novelist and television writer. Her most recent adult novel, Lucky Boy, was named an Indie Next Great Read and a Best Book of 2017 by NPR, Barnes & Noble, Library Journal, and the San Francisco Chronicle. She is the author of the middle grade novels The Sonosa Rebellion, which won the Northern California Book Award, and Boomie's Boombox, which are both here this evening. She recently wrapped up her work on the acclaimed NBC medical drama New Amsterdam. She lives in Berkeley, California with her family and a cat named Frog. Let's give one more hand for Shanthi. And last but most certainly not least, Sezin Devi Koehler is a...
It's okay.
Koehler. Names are important. It's your night.
It's all good.
Sezin Devi Koehler is a pop culture writer whose work has been featured in The Daily Beast, Scallywag Magazine, Black Girl Nerds, Certified Forgotten, Bitch Magazine, both in print and online. Bitch, favorite, amazing. Yes. Teen Vogue and Shudder's The Bite, as well as other publications. She currently writes for Entertainment Weekly's movies and television sections and has published 2 indie horror novels. Her book, Much Ado About Keanu, is the reason we are here tonight. So let's give one more hand for Sezin Devi Koehler.
Thanks so much. Thank you all for joining us. Oh my gosh, I've been waiting for this for 4 years. So this is awesome. It's a big moment. And I figured I would start with just reading the introduction from my book. And I would also maybe throw in a little bit of analysis about Bram Stoker's Dracula, since that is the outfit that I'm wearing today. This is a replica of Lucy Westenra's dress before Dracula turns her into a vampire, and so I figured, I have some interesting analysis about Keanu that I'll include. So, all right, so this is much about Keanu, and the introduction is Always Be My Keanu. In the summer of 2021, as I sat miserable in my house with both hands in braces, wondering whether I'd ever be able to write pain-free again, this book came to me like an emissary of joy. Earlier that year, my left hand had been accidentally smashed in a door, and I spent the rest of 2021 with my orthopedist trying to figure out if a microfracture in my wrist was the source of the unbearable pain. Turns out it was nerve damage from a year's worth of undiagnosed carpal tunnel syndrome, along with intersection syndrome, and doctor's orders were no computer time. I had to find other ways to keep my mind and spirit occupied. Keanu Reeves is a performer whose work I've loved since I first laid eyes on him in The Brotherhood of Justice back in 1987, when I was just 8 years old. At 42, I found myself taking new comfort in watching Keanu movies on loops as my shredded hand slowly mended. Keanu has the power to bring a smile to my soul no matter how bad I'm feeling, and during the course of my 6-month convalescence, I often asked my friends to send Keanu pics and memes to cheer me up. As I meditated on what I would want to write when I recovered, I discovered that nobody had published an in-depth exploration of Keanu's artistic output. And I might be the first multiracial, nomadic, Asian American woman whose upbringing mirrored Keanu's in many ways to deep dive into his work. I wrote the first drafts of this book's outline with just 2 fingers on my phone. And as I endured months of physiotherapy and steroid injections into my wrists, this project became my motivation for healing. And with every Keanu film I rewatched, another chapter was born. My now chronic hand injuries mean I can only write 1,500 words at the computer at a time, and that's how I eventually created this book, slowly, thoughtfully, and always with love and respect for the incomparable Keanu Reeves. I have broken the book into 3 parts, each centered on a significant card of the tarot, an archetypal language of human personality and behavior. On one hand, these cards symbolize the archetypal nature of recurring motifs in Keanu Reeves' own work, but they are also references to the cards employed by a psychic, Kate Blanchett, in Reeves' Southern Gothic film The Gift, as well as the deck used to set terms for John's duel with the High Table in John Wick Chapter 4. We begin our hero's journey with the Emperor, a major arcana tarot card symbolizing a great public figure who many admire and respect, as I deep dive into Point Break, John Wick, and analyses of race and gender in Reeves' films and television appearances. In part 2, The Devil, I'll guide you through the darker corners of Reeves' film catalog, discussing issues of gender-based violence, the myth of the American dream, perils of technology, and even a discussion of his on- and off-screen smoking. By the third part, The World, we emerge from the darkness of the underworld into the broader sociocultural reaches of Reeves' work, discussing queer theory, history, comedy, philosophy, and even a reconsideration of Keanu's critics' worst of picks. Our phone booth has just arrived, so let's hop on in. Ready, dudes? Away we go. And so part 2, The Devil. It's in part 3, The World, is where I have my reconsideration of Bram Stoker's Dracula. And this is a part, like, whenever people talk to me about Keanu Reeves, this is one of the films that they always mention that, like, oh my God, that movie's so great, except Keanu is terrible in it. Like, why is Keanu Reeves in this movie? And I'm like, first off, who are you saying this to? Like, this is very rude. And second off, it's also very inaccurate. And so I have a section here where I go into what is wrong with everyone else's opinion about Bram Stoker's Dracula. And since I'm wearing the Dracula dress, I'm going to read this one to you as well. So, while Keanu's performance in Bram Stoker's Dracula has drawn some of the same complaints as his appearances in Much Ado About Nothing and Dangerous Liaisons, I'm going to spend some extra time digging into them, since his turn as Jonathan Harker in this film arguably serves as one of the biggest critical millstones weighing down the public perception of his acting ability. And you guessed it, by my analysis, the criticisms are wholly undeserved. Let's start with Keanu's infamous British accent, which continues to get hated on all these decades later. Right? Yes, Harker's accent is indeed rather stilted, but there's a simple explanation as to why. Jonathan Harker is not of the upper classes, but works and lives among them. He's tried extraordinarily hard to mask his lower class roots by affecting a posh accent, but he hasn't quite perfected it. His accent sets him apart from the aristocracy he serves, and he's not the only character whose way of speaking gives away their humble beginnings. Jonathan is a perfect match to his fiancée, Mina Murray, who's played by Winona Ryder. a modest school teacher who now finds herself in the company of a wealthy gadabout, her friend Lucy Westenra. Like Jonathan, Mina speaks with a rather forced accent, her phrasing stilted as she tries to match Lucy's effortless royalty. Moreover, if we read Keanu's character as sharing his real-life Chinese indigenous heritage, Harker might have grown up abroad, and English might not even be his first language. Another reason why his speech might at times sound unpracticed. By the late 1800s, migration to Europe from both the Americas and the East was common, as were the stories of people with real-life backgrounds similar to the one I proposed for Jonathan Harker. For instance, there was the British-Chinese sailor James Robeson, an orphan like Mina Harker in Stoker's original novel, who was brought to London by an English couple and served aboard a British sailing ship in the 1880s and 90s. Barclay Price's The Chinese in Britain, A History of Visitors and Settlers, explores in vivid detail the Chinese immigrants who began visiting and settling in London and thereabouts beginning in the early 1700s. Unfortunately, this reading of Francis Ford Coppola's film can only go so far since he features no other people of color on screen aside from Keanu. But now that we've gone through several explanations for Reeves' accent, let's talk about something else you may have missed as you were being annoyed by how he speaks. His fantastic performance. As Jonathan Harker, Keanu's eyes are wildly expressive. You can see every thought and fear going through Harker's mind as his encounter with Count Dracula goes to hell and beyond. This is one of Keanu's most underrated portrayals, controlled and focused. The character's torment and determination, especially after he realizes he's not getting out of Castle Dracula without a fight, remind me of his later, more highly regarded performances in Speed, Constantine, and John Wick. There are similar shades of exhaustion, both physical and emotional, including momentary glimpses of resignation to a dark fate that quickly get replaced with anger and determination to survive. Echoes of Keanu's beleaguered title characters in Constantine and John Wick are also evident when Harker is chained in the bowels of the vampire's castle and being fed on by Dracula's beautiful monster brides, then finally musters up the last of his strength to scale the castle walls and flee to safety. This moment especially reminds me of the scene where John Constantine uses a dead woman's cat as a portal to hell, both resignedly and resolutely putting his feet into a bucket of water and mentally preparing for a journey as terrible as Harker's. And after Harker escapes and the showdown with Dracula begins in earnest, I'm reminded of the scene in Speed, where Reeves' Jack Traven discovers that his partner Harry has been murdered by the terrorist Howard Payne. Jack melts down with unbridled rage and despair, and Annie, played by Sandra Bullock, pleads with him to not lose hope. The dynamic between Jonathan Harker and Dracula is similar to the one between Jack Traven and Howard Payne. Unlike the other vampire hunters in Dracula, Jonathan is supremely pissed off, as he should be, considering Dracula's violence against him was so very personal. And if we want to talk about ham-handed acting and an over-the-top accent, look no further than another Dracula star, Sir Anthony Hopkins, as Van Helsing, whose cackling absurdity often reminds me of Keaton's Dogberry in Much Ado About Nothing. The weakest link in Dracula is not Keanu Reeves. Thank you.
Thank you, Sezin. It's great to be here with you.
Thank you so much for being here as well. You're so awesome.
Thank you. Sorry. And thank you, Green Apple and Car, for having us as well. So I want to start a lot of ways, but I'll start this way.
Okay.
I just want to comment on the language of the book, which was a relief for me because, you know, it says Keanu Reeves, it says Much Ado About Keanu, Critical Reeves Theory. So I hear critical theory. Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh no, like college coming back at me. But no, the language is actually very accessible and journalistic in a sense. Like you don't get that heavy, convoluted academic theory, which I'm allergic to personally. So if you're also allergic to this, you are in a safe space with this book. I just wanted to put that out there. Yeah. I want to know, I guess one of the things I always wonder about when I read someone's book is where did this start for you? Mm-hmm. Like eventually you ended up with a book about Keanu Reeves, but what was the seed of that?
So, well, and also I just thank you for commenting on the language because I wanted to write something that was critical theory, but that was accessible to everyone. And when I wrote it, I was in Florida, where critical race theory has been banned, right?
Mhm.
And so that was also part of the reason, like I knew that I wanted to write something that was going to be kind of an FU to the government that was like ruling my life at the time.
Yeah.
And but also like when I started the project, I wanted to move away from writing about like trauma and PTSD, like that. I was writing a lot of personal essays, and I just found myself living in sadness so much. And then when I had the hand injuries, I was like, I can't stay in this place anymore. And I really just want to focus on writing something that's joyful, right? And so I was in, trauma therapy and like talking with my therapist about like what does this mean for my career going forward? Because I've made my career writing these really dark essays about terrible things, and like where do you go from here? Like how do you shift gears? And so when I I decided that I wanted to write something joyful, Keanu is, he's the one who popped up. But also before I started to write my book about him, I wanted to write a book about River Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why this book is actually dedicated to River, because I feel like he's also someone who's kind of a cultural touchstone for a lot of people, especially for us Gen Xers.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like one of the first people that we lost when, I was like, 12 or 13 when he died. And it was just devastating for me. It was the first big loss. And so I really would love to write like an oral history or, something similar to this, but with more of an oral historic kind of vibe about River Phoenix. But at that point in my career, I didn't have the platform to do something to have a project that ambitious, right?
Mm-hmm.
I needed to do something else in between kind of to prove myself. And I also would want to have River's family to be involved in a project like that.
Right.
So I was very upset at the thought that okay, I want to do this joyful project, but I can't write about River. And so one night I woke up in the middle of the night and I had this kind of epiphany, and it was that Keanu Reeves is the River Phoenix who lived.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that's where the book came from. Yeah.
Wow. And so is River Phoenix like your first love, your first crush?
I think he's the love of my life, honestly.
Yeah.
I think I never got to meet him. Oh my gosh. And I mean, don't cry, girl. But to this day, it hurts me so much that he's gone and that the world went on without him. Like, how is that possible?
Yeah.
And it just, and I've lost other people in the meantime. And again, the idea that how does it keep going on?
Mm-hmm.
And then you think, Ki is one of Keanu's best friends. And Keanu found ways in his performances to always turn all of his pain and the difficult things that he'd been through into this wonderful art that's
Mm-hmm.
so meaningful. Mm-hmm. And so that was another reason why I chose Keanu, is because he kind of had that same process of taking the pain and turning it into something beautiful. And also he doesn't have any stains by his name either.
Yeah.
He's not been implicated in any kind of Me Too scandal. He's not a horrible person who abuses people on his movie sets. He's and I did a lot of research.
Mm-hmm.
I really, before I decided, I fixated on him, I did so much research to make sure that there was nothing hiding. And there were a few drunken and disorderly things from back in the 90s when that's normal when you're 20 something, celebrity, right?
Yeah.
But no one was hurt. He was just drunk in public.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the worst thing that I found that he had done, right?
Right.
And so,
We've all been drunk in public.
Some of us are still drunk in public. Oh my God.
I'm not naming any names.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So River was a jumping off point, and I think I'm generalizing here, but projects always have a jumping off point that aren't necessarily what they become.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And so this was yours. And there's no crush like the crush that you have when you're 12 or 13 years old. That's life.
Yeah.
That's a life-ending crush.
Yeah. And then he died. How? I know. Oh, man. It just, man. And then his last film is not even available. So it kind of came out for a brief moment. Yeah, and apparently it's one of his best roles and the whole thing, and I've never even seen it. So which I don't know if I actually...
Film?
It's called Dark Blood. Yeah, and it was this very, almost like a play, and only 3 actors in it, and they filmed it in the desert, and it was very intense, and I'm of course blanking on the names of the actors who are in it, but everyone was very 90s, very 90s cast, but 3 of them. And he played this like kind of serial killing drifter who kind of attaches himself to this couple. And it was, obviously it was very emotionally taxing on him. And then it's just not available. So, which just bums me out because he made so little that just, it's so precious, everything that he made, that it's there, but like we can't access it. So I'm hoping at some point that'll come back out.
Yeah. And I'll say this, then we'll go back to the book, but celebrity culture in the 90s, when River was big and when Keanu first hit, it was so much different than it is now. Like we didn't have access to all this content, like endless content about celebrities, which made them more precious. It made them more, like every little morsel I could get about Josh Charles.
That's a good one.
Was like this like treasure, and now you just get like endless resources if you're interested. And I think do you think that's changed the nature of how we view celebrities?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, honestly, I kind of feel like movies were how I became a really good researcher, because like back then, you have to pay really close attention to like who, if you want to know who the cute guy in the movie is, like you have to pay attention, what's his name, and you've got to watch the cast at the end, find them, right? And then you have to get subscribed to all of the magazines because you don't know which one he's going to appear in, and then scour them to see if you can recognize him, right? And then Keanu was so cool because like you could recognize him really easily, and you recognize his name really easily.
Right.
And so I feel like back then you had to work so hard, like to learn anything about anyone. And if you wanted to run into someone, like, I mean, now you know where everyone is on social media, so you can run into them anywhere.
Yeah, you know exactly. Like sometimes you know their exact location.
Like they're literally like, oh, we're at this restaurant, and you're like, oh my god, are you trying to get killed? Like, what are because I'm still thinking like in the 80s, like what, like why would you announce where you are? Like there's, oh my god, like to me that's a security issue. That's why Keanu doesn't have social media, and so. Yeah, so I feel like now we have so much access, and then there's also this like sense of entitlement that people have over celebrities because they feel like they know them. And I talk about this a bit in the book, like the parasocial celebrity relationship, which is like this imaginary relationship that you have with someone famous. And so you think that you know them because they have a social media presence, or you love their movies, or you've seen an interview with them where they shared something and you're like, oh, I've been through that too, and so I relate with them. And so in your head, you think that you're better friends than you are. You're not friends with them at all, right? And so back in the day, like we didn't think we were friends with anyone, right? We had our scrapbooks, we had our posters. Yeah, we did know our place. And I don't know if like if that was a better way to be, because like, I mean, obviously the industry was still kind of killing young people, and it's doing it now, and the roles that people are playing and the dark places that they go to for these projects, have cost so many lives, and that hasn't changed. But like now, I mean, I feel like now the added thing is like when you have fans who actually do kill their like, Selena. Like what happened to Selena, there was that girl in Orlando. She was like on The Voice or something, and oh my gosh, I mean, there's actually at this point so many stories of these things, and so so it's weird that like to be among folks who think that they have such entitlement toward celebrities, and that celebrities owe them something for the fandom, right? And it's not really, we never had that growing up.
No.
So. Yeah, so it's definitely changed. I feel like it's much more dangerous now for fan and for celebrity, because I mean, there's some lonely people out there who really this is their only friend, right? And they're not your friend,
right? Yeah. Right. There's a blurring of reality.
Yeah, and I get a lot of people who when I tell them that I've written a book about Keanu's work as an actor, they're like, oh, I don't like him as an actor, but I like him as a person. I think he's a really nice person. And I'm always like, dude, you don't know him. Like,
Yeah.
you don't know him as a person. You're never going to know him as a person. Like, that's what was another reason why I wrote this, was to kind of try to like reframe the discussion about him from being a good person, from him to be a good actor.
Yeah.
And he's a really talented performer, and he's a meaningful performer, and his identity brings so much to his roles. So like, you liking him as a person, that should be like the fifth or sixth thing that you like about him,
Right,
you know?
Right.
Like, his acting, that's what he offers us, is his performances, and that should be the thing that's first. So,
and that's what this book analyzes. I mean, you don't. This isn't like a fangirl book. You know, you're obviously a fan of his, but it really does sort of stick to his work and to the culture around his work.
yeah, exactly. And that was, that was intentional.
Yeah.
And I really only mention anything personal from his life when it's relevant to the work. And which I feel like is also, that's the only time that he ever talks about personal things, is whenever it's relevant to his work. And so I kept that, I kept some of those details in the book because I've heard him do it as well. And so I figured that, like, for me to talk about those things in that context made sense, because Keanu himself has been comfortable enough to talk about his work like that. So yeah, I definitely, and it's definitely not a fangirl book, because I mean, I definitely have some criticisms of Keanu. And I mean, it's painful to do, but like, he's not perfect. I mean, he has made mostly good choices, but there's a few things that he does in his career that like are, socially and culturally like troubling and problematic, and those need to get called out. But see, people like him so much as a person, and they want to be friends with him, that no one mentions these things. So
did you hesitate? I mean, was it difficult for you to sort of be critical of certain moves he's made in his career, knowing that he's alive, he has this like, fandom that thinks he's the best person alive. Just the sort of like personal nature of focusing a book on one individual. Like, was that a weird sort of chasm to swallow?
Yeah, it definitely was. And there were, and also like, while I was writing, he'd been in 78 movies. So that's a lot of data. Like, that is so much data that as a researcher to code and like, organize, and that's just the movies. Like, he's also been in television shows. He has been in plays. He's got a publishing company. He's written a novel. He has a motorcycle company. He's got a band. Like, the man does everything. And so the book talks about all of that stuff. And so, so there was so much information to sift through, and with someone with such a long career. And so that was one of the things that was really particularly difficult, was just going through so much and trying to keep all of it in my brain at the same time to analyze it. And I really, like, he has this character, he plays Johnny Mnemonic from, I don't know, have you all seen that movie, Johnny Mnemonic? So he plays a data courier, and it's this futuristic world where like you rent out a part of your brain and they store information in it, and and people are using it for nefarious purposes and for not nefarious purposes. Like, there's government like uses, and it's a whole thing where people are literally renting out their brain. And I started to feel like I had this syndrome that they have in this, where they put too much data in their brains, and then you start like having seizures and stuff. Like I would start to have migraines. Like, it was like, how do you keep all of this information in here? And I kept thinking to myself, man, you could have chosen someone else to write a book about who's only been in 10 movies. Like, you could be writing a book about David Lynch. He's made like 12 films. Like, like, why have you done this to yourself? Like, no one asked for this. Right. And so, yeah, I definitely had moments of that. And then I also, I've been a pop culture writer for a while, and I've written things that were critical of people who everyone loves very much. And, I've gotten swatted at my house, which is like when someone calls the police and tries to get you killed, basically, by the police. And they sent a SWAT team to my house. And like, so stuff like that. I've gotten death threats and worse online. I mean, my goodness, like, it's just from like writing a piece of criticism about information that's out there about someone who's famous, right? And so knowing that I was going to be including some criticisms of Keanu in this book, I was like, okay, well, like, I've kind of been through that, and I definitely had security concerns. But then I was like, you know what? Like, if folks want to behave that way, like, it's so un-Keanu. Like, what are y'all doing to make Keanu proud? Like, if you're gonna do that, like, and everything is everything in the book that there's opinions, but the opinions are all based in like science and fact. So you can have a problem with my opinions, but like the fact that, let's say, with the gun violence in his films, there is so much gun violence in Keanu's movies. Like, my God, he kills 440 something people in John Wick. I mean, just guns are a huge problem in American society, and a lot of people want to be like John Wick because he looks so cool when he's shooting people. And Keanu himself is against guns, but like this character is in the pop culture imagination, is in our consciousness as this hero with like this weird anti-hero with these guns. And that is a problem. And I mean, I'm a gun crime survivor myself, and it almost feels like it doesn't belong that Keanu is doing this. And so there's a whole section about that in the book. And so I know that there's going to, if the NRA people get their hands on this, and John Wick is one of their poster boys, which is like, how dare you? Like, that's not right. But like, he is. And so these are things that, I had to talk about in the book. And if folks get to those parts and have a problem, like, I do worry. I do worry about what the backlash will be, but also it's all stuff that needs to be said. And in a lot of ways, I feel like that Keanu would agree with some of it. And in fact, he recently did an interview, I can't remember where it was, but where someone asked him about about John Wick, and they were like, does John Wick like guns? And he's like, oh yeah, John Wick loves guns. And they were like, what about you? And he was like, oh no, I don't like guns. And I was like, that's cool. Like, all right. And then they just left it at that, where I would have asked a lot more questions. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are contradictions between his career choices and who he is.
Right.
As a person.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, and I tried to focus on his career.
Yeah.
And I think, in terms of like when you're writing a book about one person, and it's not a biography, and you want to focus on their work. And also I feel like people don't focus on his work enough. And so that was the other thing, is like in interviews, when you see folks talking to him, they're always asking him very personal questions. No one's ever asking him about like his technique as an actor. Like if I have a chance to interview him, that would be my first question. Like, dude, tell me about your process. Like, how do you do all of that with your face on screen? Like, is it mapped out beforehand? Is it happening in the moment? Like, I have so many questions about his physicality, about his performances, and no one ever talks to him because they're like too busy trying to be his best friend. And, we're journalists. And so like, we're not going to be the best friend of our subject.
Right.
And a lot of journalists out here, like, forget that when they're faced with Keanu, they'll do it with everyone else, but like not with Keanu.
Yeah.
So I felt like someone had to do it, and so I wrote a whole book about it.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Speaking of who he is as a person, I want to transition a bit to a lot of the writing that you do about his multiracial identity and his new status as an Asian American icon of sorts. So just, I mean, I don't have any like direct questions that I want to throw at you, but it would be good to just sort of hear what you have to say. And I know it's all in the book, folks, but what happened there? Because like for so long, Hollywood, people in Hollywood would just sort of like, if they could hide the fact that they weren't white, they would. Right. I mean, this happened for centuries.
Yep.
For as long as Hollywood existed, right?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And only recently have we seen sort of more diverse casting, and now a sort of embrace of one's non-white ethnicity. Yeah. So can you talk to us a little bit about that, about Keanu as an Asian American, and maybe also break down for us what his
background is? Of course, yeah. So Keanu is... so he's multiracial, and his father is indigenous Hawaiian and Chinese heritage, and he grew up in Hawaii, his father. His mom has Irish and French ancestry, but Keanu's a third culture kid, so that's someone who was like raised outside of their parents' passport countries. So he was born in Beirut, Lebanon, and then moved around a lot, and then eventually settled in Canada. So, it's funny that he's known, he plays so many like quintessentially American roles, but he's Canadian. And I love that about him, that he's never gotten American citizenship, and he doesn't need it. And so, and it's something that I talk about as well a lot in the book. His early roles, he definitely was often coded as white. So we would see his white parents on screen, and even though I never saw him as passing. So, I mean, even, the first time that I saw him was in Brotherhood of Justice, and that's like a 1986, just a TV action movie. Kiefer Sutherland is in it, Billy Zane is in it. It's pretty wild. It's actually streaming for free now on Tubi or one of those sites. And it's definitely worth a watch because it's kind of about the militarization of high schools and just school campuses in general. And it was really ahead of its time, which a lot of his films are. And so he's playing white in that film. He plays white in a lot of his early films. And then there's a point in the 90s when all of a sudden, like, it switches and you can tell they kind of obscure his background, or they make it clear that there's an absentee parent that you can assume is a parent of color. And so he's no longer really, he's no longer actively playing white. And, my editor and I kind of went back and forth about what the reasoning was behind it. And after a lot of questions, what I kind of settled on was the idea that by the late 90s, he was a box office draw, and he could control the narrative about himself at that point. And he also had a lot more power in what films he could choose to make. And so I definitely noticed that there's that shift once he hit that stardom point, especially with The Matrix. Like at post Matrix, his type of roles really change, and there's a lot more ambiguousness in his ethnic identity based on like who you see as his parents on screen. And I just thought that was fantastic. I mean, and I feel, and this is another question that I would ask him if I ever have a chance to interview him, like, was that conscious? Or did he just finally have a point where he had so many scripts available that he could choose better the ones that represented him, right? And so that's another big question that I have for the man at some point, if I ever have a chance to talk to him, like on, like do an Inside the Actors Studio, except it's me instead of that other guy. I want to know, like, was it conscious? Because when you watch the movies back to back, you can see the switch happen. And so it's like, it makes me wonder. And he seems like he's a very intentional person in the work that he does. And in one of the books about his work in John Wick, a person interviewed mentioned that, like, at any given point, Keanu has like 150 scripts on his desk. Like, he gets everything gets sent to him. He wants them, and he reads them all. So, people talk about him being stupid and stuff all the time, and I'm like, what? It's like he's a voracious reader, and he reads every script that he gets sent. And so the films that he's making now, these are all very active choices that he's making. So, I mean, in the last 20 years, each film he chose personally for a reason, right? Like, and I think that's an amazing thing to know about him. And so when you go back and watch some of the films that are maybe not even as well received or that never got very much attention, he chose that. Like, among 100 other things that he could have done, he chose that. And when I watch the films with that in mind, I just find that each of those movies becomes so much more special and magical in so many different ways. And and then I take the magic and I break it down into science.
Yeah. I mean, he's made choices, and those are telling.
Yeah, very, very telling. Yeah.
Okay. And you yourself are multiracial. Did that inform your interest in writing about this part of Keanu? Can you talk about that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, because I remember when I first saw him as a kid, I feel like he was one of the first people I was like, he's mixed. I was like, I'm sure he's mixed. Like, we just didn't, back in the 80s, you didn't see a lot of mixed folks on screen. Like, people, and the folks that were mixed were trying very hard, like we were talking about earlier, were trying very hard to mask their people of color identity, right? And they were doing their best to pass as white. And so Keanu, I never felt ever could do that for me. And so, so I'm half Sri Lankan, I'm half American. And so just having the idea that, wow, there is someone, I know he's mixed. And then when I would found the Teen Beat magazine or whatever that was like explained his heritage, I was like, oh my God, and he was born in Beirut. Like, it's like me, like I was born somewhere, like we were all born, all the kids that I grew up with were all third culture kids who were born in all kinds of places that weren't where our passports were from, or our parents were from, different cultures. And so I always felt a kinship with him. That was one of the starts of the kinship that I felt with him. And the fact that like most of the other books that have been written about him, the nonfiction books, were all written by white folks. And I felt like there was just a real gap in the analysis. There was a gap in understanding, and there was a huge gap in just like the knowledge that they were presenting about him that just I felt like it needed to be filled somehow. And and then it just like made sense that I would be the one to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did a little research of my own, and I tried to find other Asian American actors that we didn't know were Asian or part Asian.
Ooh.
So who did I find? Okay, so one interesting one was Mark Paul Gosselaar from Saved by the Bell.
Yeah.
What was his name? Jesse? No. What was his name? Who's the main guy?
Zach.
Yeah, from Saved by the Bell. He's part Asian. Fred Armisen from Portlandia and Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
Lou Diamond Phillips, who interestingly, we know him as Richie Valens from La Bamba. So he played a Mexican kid. He grew up in I think I don't know where Richie Valens grew up.
LA, right?
LA, yeah. And yet he's Filipino. He's
Filipino.
He's half Filipino.
Yeah.
And the first Asian woman to be nominated for an Oscar was Merle Oberon back in the 1930s, 40s.
Yeah.
She was half Indian, half British.
Yeah.
And they completely just made up a white identity for her. They said she was from Tasmania. Why of all places Tasmania? They probably thought that was, I don't know.
Because you couldn't investigate it. It was so far away, right? Like that was back in the day. We could just Google like, oh, who's from Tasmania?
Right.
What do they look like in Tasmania? Like,
exactly.
Oh man.
Yeah. So we've been watching multiracial actors for forever.
Yeah.
And just only recently do we get to actually know. Also thanks to social media.
Yeah, and that's true. And in fact, Mark Paul Gosselaar, he is on the spin-off of that show Blackish, and it's Mixed-ish. Yeah, and so there's like a whole show about us now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, which is really cool. And I remember he talked about like how refreshing it was that he finally got to play someone of his own background.
Yeah.
And you think, wow, you spend your whole career like passing as white, and like there's this whole other aspect of your identity and your culture that just like and then your agent's telling you not to say anything about it. Like it's so weird. I mean, it must have. Yeah, I just think about how there's so many constraints that folks had in the 90s. And when Keanu first began, they didn't want him to use his real name. They wanted him to go by Casey Reeves instead. And the Keanu was like too ethnic.
Right.
And, I mean, I'm just glad that he didn't do that.
Yeah.
Because, gosh, I don't think I would have been able to, I don't know if I would have written this book about him if, because that feels like he would have self-whitewashed. And then it's like, that would have been a message. So I never thought about that.
Yeah,
actually,
there's a lot in the name.
Yeah, really, there is. Yeah.
So we're gonna move soon into audience Q&A, but I feel like we need to talk about my favorite Keanu movie, which of course is Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. I mean, that's where I first saw Keanu Reeves.
Oh.
And one thing I was thinking about today was that there was this sort of trend of like the wise fool in the 90s of these like sort of idiot heroes. And there were always two of them together. So there was like Bill and Ted, there was Dumb and Dumber, there was Beavis and Butthead, there was like Romeo and Michelle's High School Reunion, there was a whole lot of them.
Wayne and Garth.
Wayne and Garth.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, you said Wayne and Garth. Yeah, shaking. And what was that? Like, there was something about that time period where, like, we just had these idiots saving the earth.
I think it's interesting, when we bring the tarot into it, because I broke the book down into these representative tarot cards, and, we've got the Fool tarot card.
Yeah.
And, and so the Fool is the everyman, right? Mm-hmm. And so that was a time where, like, the hero could be just a normal person. That was not a normal thing. Like, but before that, the hero was like Han Solo. The hero was like, Robin Hood. It was always someone who had some kind of power, and they had,
Or
you
had
know,
come unknowingly from some, like,
right,
Luke Skywalker,
yeah,
right?
like Luke Skywalker, Superman, like, you know,
Yeah.
it was, they had these things that were bestowed upon them, whether it was weaponry or privilege or whatever, that made them special, right, and extraordinary in some way. And all of a sudden, you have these doofuses who, like, they kind of have, you know, they're kind of failing at life, and like they can't hold a job down there. Everyone hates them, sort of. Like, I mean, it's always funny to watch Bill and Ted because we love them so much, but like everyone hates them in the movies.
Yeah.
Like, they're so disliked.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you forget that when you watch it again. You're like, wow, the only person who likes them is Missy, right? I mean, Mom. And so it's fascinating that there was this turn into just like a normal person could also change the world. But I feel like that genre has been taken to like almost a failing upwards in modern pop culture. So we see things like Ted Lasso, for example. Like, I know everyone's a big fan of that show, and it's very touching and everything. But, you know, only white people are allowed to like just do something that they're not qualified to do, and then somehow like the narrative has them winning. And, you know, they were just not qualified to run a football team at all, or soccer, as you would say here. You know, and the whole story is about them making all these mistakes and screwing everything up, and then they're somehow still winning in the end. And like, if you were to gender, I mean, if you were to race flip that, like, that just wouldn't happen.
Do we not see that?
We don't.
Is it an exclusively white thing in the media?
It really is. And actually, when I was watching Ted Lasso, I was so bothered by it that I put out a call on social media for folks to send me examples of people of color in a similar situation where they're given a multi-million-dollar, you know, sports franchise or a business or something, and they're completely incompetent. They have none of the skills necessary, and whether, you know, and then they're allowed to fail on the job until they finally get it right by making mistakes and losing even more money, right? There aren't any. Yeah, there aren't any. And the only examples that people could give me were all of like folks of color who were already talented and smart and who just accidentally were given power. And then did really well with the power. But I was like, that's not what I asked though. Like, that's actually the opposite of what I asked. And that also proves my point that like, you don't just have like two guys from, you know, East Oakland just being handed a football team and then like, oh, like, good luck. Like, and if you lose $5 million, no problem. Like, we'll keep giving you more money to do this. It's like, right? Like, no, it's not going to happen. So like, even if they're the most talented soccer players in East Oakland, like it's not gonna happen. So so it's interesting. It's interesting how the fool, and then when you bring the tarot card into it, how the fool, it flips, right? And so you have the everyman hero, but then also it's this who has the privilege of failing. And failing upward. And interestingly, Keanu is the only person of color in the whole list of them. So
that's true.
Yeah.
Beavis and Butthead aren't. They're white. They're pretty white.
They're pretty white. I mean, you could possibly. Do we ever see their parents?
I never really was a big fan. I didn't really watch the show.
Yeah, I wasn't either, but I did watch it just out of like cultural curiosity. And I don't think we ever saw their parents. So I mean, maybe we could code them.
Okay.
I don't want to watch it though. Don't make me watch it.
Okay, with that, I would love to hear some questions from everyone else. Anyone want to start?
Don't be shy.
And I will, but just while you all think, because I just sprang that on you.
Right.
What are some of the writers that have influenced you over the years, and who do you really look to for inspiration?
Oh my goodness.
Or not writers, anything, films, whatever.
Oh, well, I mean, obviously Keanu and River. In terms of writers, I mean, when as a pop culture writer, I would say like there's this woman who writes for Vulture. Her name is Angelica J. Bastien, and she is amazing. Like, her film criticism is just so like, it's so poetic and it's just gorgeously crafted, and I wish that I could write like her. And so she was definitely a big inspiration when I wrote Much Ado About Keanu. Except I opted for a much more accessible tone than what she uses. And her writing is very meaty, and it's almost like poetry. And so as you're reading the way that she crafts sentences and stuff, you can tell it's just glorious prose. But it's also that sometimes is a little bit more difficult for folks to read. And so when I was writing Much Ado About Keanu, I opted for something that was a little bit more straightforward, just because I wanted the most people, and especially of his fans, to be able to like pick this up and just be able to read it, especially considering the topics and the themes and the critical race theory, right? And but like most of my favorite writers are fiction writers. So I have one of them right here sitting next to me. So so there's you. There's like a bunch of other South Asian women in our cohort, like Naomi Munawira. Oh my goodness, like Abir Haq. Abir and I will be doing an event in a few weeks, and like Abir, she's a memoirist, and she's just again a poet who writes prose. And like I was definitely looking at her writing a lot as I was working on my book. But yeah, a lot of South Asian women. I mean, and like I don't know why, like my brain is just going blank on names. It just
people
does.
ask you that question.
Like seriously, I'm like I sit there and I categorize all of this stuff. I'm like, why can you not remember who your favorite writers are right now? Like this is so weird. Yeah.
Sorry.
I had one question.
Yeah.
Thank you. So my favorite Keanu movie, and one that I feel had the most impact on me, was The Matrix. But I don't feel like I have the terminology or the language or the sort of like the analytical skills to understand why it worked so well and he worked so well in that movie. And I'd be really interested to hear what your perspective are on his performance in that movie and how it added to like the believability or the impact of that film.
Oh, absolutely.
So the question, I'm just going to repeat the questions for the online audience. The question is Keanu Reeves in The Matrix. Like, in a nutshell, why did that work so well? Why did it feel so true?
So there's a few things. So Keanu as an action star, what's wonderful about him is that he never built up his physique like other action stars did, right? And so I think one of the things that makes Matrix work is that you needed someone who could do all these stunts, but who also could be Thomas Anderson. So if you think of like, John Cena or, The Rock, like they could play Neo, but they can't be Thomas Anderson, right? And so Keanu's physique has, again, like the fact that he's never really gotten very built up, I feel like that has made a lot of his roles, especially as an action star, very believable. Like even when he was in Speed, you actually, when you have someone like The Rock being a cop, you're like, okay, yeah, duh. But like you have someone like Keanu in this role where he's doing these kind of impossible things, and this bus can't go fast. Like he looks like he would be that person in real life. And I feel like that's what happens in The Matrix as well, is that he can flip from the real world into the Matrix world, and he makes sense visually in both sides, right? But then also the fact that he is multiracial. I don't know if you've noticed this, but when you go back, you will notice it, that most of the people that have been extracted from the Matrix are people of color. And so, when you look at the Matrix itself, it's run by these agents who are all white, and they're all cops, and they're all feds, right? And like the way that their world is it's corporate, and everyone who has escaped are all not like that, right? There's only a handful of white folks in the resistance. And so when you bring a race reading into it, and this is, heralded by the multiracial messiah of Keanu Reeves, who is multiracial himself and who a lot of people do think of as a messiah, like that's another thing that just adds this level to Matrix that is why I feel like that film is still resonant now. And why, a lot of communities, a lot of marginalized communities in particular, are really drawn to that film because it does make sense. And Keanu in it, I mean, the casting is perfect. Like one of the other people who was supposed to be in it was Will Smith. And I feel like that it wouldn't have necessarily worked as well, right? Because playing Thomas Anderson, would he have been able to do it? Because that's the part that makes that makes the alternate. That's what makes it work. And I feel like Keanu was the one who had the range to do that, aside, from everyone else who was offered that role. So, yeah. Does that make sense?
Mm. Yeah.
Did you want to ask another? Do you have a follow up or?
I think I should let Anne speak. I had a follow up to this.
Ask your
No, please.
No, I was just thinking that if it was Will Smith, then it would have been like a sci-fi movie, but it was more than a sci-fi movie. It was this movie that was just super powerful and transformative to me. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, absolutely, and I agree with that, and I think Keanu brings that to a lot of his films, and The Matrix, and that's one reason that The Matrix was a turning point for him, because there is no one else who could have played that role. I think, he was perfect for it. It was made for him, and I think he's the reason why he's one of the biggest reasons why that film is still so important now, and why it's aged so well. Really, is his performance. And oh my gosh, Thank you. That's an awesome question. I love that film.
My question was about a different factor in a film's success or an actor's success, which is the director. Have there been particular directors that Keanu has gelled with? What have you discovered in your research?
Oh, so one of the...
Can I repeat?
Of course.
Yeah, so have there been particular directors that Keanu has gelled with and that have really made a difference in his trajectory?
Oh, absolutely. So Keanu is one of the few superstar actors who's worked with a lot of women directors, since the beginning of his career. So, for example, Point Break is one of his most iconic roles, directed by Catherine Bigelow. It's one of his most nuanced performances. I mean, it's just, that film is stupendous. I mean, The Matrix, we were just talking about The Matrix. The Matrix is directed by trans women. And, so not only has Keanu worked with so many women directors, but he's also one of the few of the big superstars to have worked with trans women to boot. Like, he has definitely made some very, very excellent choices when it comes to who he works with. And I mean, a lot of his early roles, like, for example, he did this film from like the late 80s called Permanent Record. And it's a drama and it's about teen suicide. And I remember when it first came out, it was so shocking, because like, we didn't talk about mental health in the 80s, and like, it wasn't a thing. And so you have this whole film where it's this very taboo subject, and it's directed by a woman. And, so from the beginning of his career, he has always pushed the envelope of who he works with. And so those projects have always been really, really interesting. I mean, Point Break would not be as phenomenal a film as it is if a man had directed it. Like, I'm sorry, but like, Lori Petty's character would have been just naked all the time. There would have been like an hour of sex scenes. You know what I mean? Like, it would have been out of control. And instead we have this like character study between these two men and this woman, and like the water. It's so beautiful. And that's all, the woman's vision. That's the female gaze at play there. And so he has opted to work with women. I feel like that has also made a really big impact on his career. I mean, there's literally folks like Brad Pitt. The only woman he ever worked with was his ex-wife, Angelina Jolie. Like, that guy, like, how do you not work with any other one except one you were once like connected to? Like, how does that work? Like, that feels like an intentional choice, man. Like, and Keanu he's never done that. Like, he's just since the beginning of his career, since the 80s. Like, I find that so amazing about him.
Cool.
Yeah.
There's a great essay in here about Point Break and Catherine Bigelow and her sort of role as director with that.
Yeah. Love that movie. And there's posters of Point Break over there, which I'm totally gonna snag one, because I had one when I was a kid, in high school, and I need one now.
Do you Do you have a follow-up, Ben, or should we go to someone else?
I met Catherine Bigelow
Oh, right.
at a Point Break event. It was, I don't know what year, 15 years ago maybe. There was a audience participatory Point Break performance happening at the Metreon. Do you know what I'm talking
Yes,
about?
I do. Point Break
And
Live.
My friends and I, yes, and my friends and I went to that, and it just so happened that it had been going on for enough weeks that it had come to the notice of Catherine Bigelow herself.
Oh, wow.
And so while she was in San Francisco, she made kind of made an appearance, and they let her be kind of a faux director of this silly thing. And my friends and I, who arrived late and could only sit in the very front corner section, happened to be sitting right next to her. And so it was very cool.
Wow. That sounds fun.
Wow.
Thanks.
Yeah, we have another question.
In the course of your research, did you find anything about Keanu that surprised you?
So was there anything that surprised you about Keanu in your research?
Yeah, I was actually surprised not to find any bad stuff. That actually did surprise me, because I feel like every day we find out some other horrible thing about a celebrity that we all really like very much. And so the more that I dug, the less that I found, which that surprised me. And I think realizing how many women that he worked with, I also hadn't realized it was so many. I mean, I feel like the number is 20 something. It's a really high number. I'm terrible with numbers, so don't quote me on that. But I've listed them all in the book. And then I think another thing that surprised me was how often he's the younger man when he's in leading roles. So, because he often in his romantic comedies, he's often just perfect. And so when I was kind of digging into his romantic comedies and, just trying to look at the age differences, because most romantic comedies, the men are allowed to get older and their co-star she gets younger and younger and younger, and it's super creepy and super weird. And Keanu's don't do that. But in the course of doing all the math for that, which I had to have people double check for me because I'm really bad at it, I just discovered so many cases from the time that, again, from the beginning of his career, that he was the younger man. And that was really surprising as well. How many roles? I mean, I would say it's maybe over a dozen roles where he's the younger man in the situation. And the story, he's also the younger man in the story. And that was so cool to realize, that it wasn't just a one-off thing, that this had been going on since the beginning. And so obviously, he's a fan of women, and he's it feels like his career has always been shaped by a very healthy relationship with women. And that was weirdly surprising as well to find out, because you just sort of, I don't know, you kind of expect it, you're just waiting for a ball to drop or something to break, right? And I finally got to a point about maybe a year and a half ago where I was like, whew, nothing's gonna happen with, I'm not gonna find anything bad out about Keanu. I think we can all relax now. Really, because I feel like I would have found it if it was out there, either that or that's really good NDAs, but I've met him a few times, and I don't get the sense that there's anything that's hidden. I really think the depth at which his career has reflected his respective women was really, I did not expect it to be so deep and for such a long time in his career. So, yeah, thank you. That was an awesome question.
Did you have trouble figuring out where to stop? Because he's continuing to do new work. He's now going to be waiting for Godot with Alex Winter, which seems like it would be incredible to include in a book. But at some point you have to publish the book, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So the question.
Sorry, the question is, you repeat the question.
So the question was, when did I know it was time to stop writing? And because he's very prolific and he's constantly making new things. And so I had to stop at some point, and we needed to get the book published. And so we had decided on a pub date, right? And so that was the end. And by the time the book is out now, and when I was working on it, there were 78 movies. Now there are 80 movies. So it's already out of date, and but it's in my contract that for the next editions that I will be updating them, and so that's pretty cool. And yes, and Keanu's going to be on Broadway, so he's got his first Broadway show starting in September. And I actually do mention that in the book because it was right when I was just finishing final edits. They had announced that it was happening. So it's got a mention in there, and I have my ticket to see him. So in next editions, there will be some analysis of that. But I also broke the book down in a thematic way. And what's kind of already fascinating about the way that I broke the book down is that all of these roles fit into the analysis that I already have. So it's basically now it's going forward. It's just going to be like watching the films and being like, oh, that goes in chapter 22. That one goes in chapter 6. That's in the violence against women chapter. Like, and it's just, everything is going to be really easy to slot in because these themes, they follow him, and it's like, he's a deck of tarot cards and I kind of can tell now which are the cards that he's going to pull. And I think that's kind of interesting. Yeah.
You talked about your transformation from writing darker stuff to writing from joy. And I'm really curious to hear, both or about your process, but also in writing from joy, transformed you.
Wow. Okay, so the question was, because earlier I mentioned how I used to write about a lot of darker themes, and when I began this book, it was from a place of joy. And so the question is how I made the transition and
just
how it changed me.
If it changed
you. And if it changed
and
me.
just the process of writing. It takes a while. It takes time.
Yeah.
So the process of writing. I don't know.
And the process of writing from a place of joy instead of from trauma. Yes, it definitely changed me. It definitely changed me. And now that I'm done with it, I'm struggling a little bit to know who I am as a writer at the moment because I've been trying to go back to writing essays and it's just not working because I don't want to write about sad things. I've just done this opus of joy and I don't want to write about sad stuff. I'm trying to find ways because you can't avoid it, but trying to figure out ways to write about dark things without focusing on the dark things. And so that's that is a whole process. I definitely feel changed by this project. And so now it's and then I was oh, well, maybe you just need to go back to doing what you were doing before. And I'm no. So now I have to adjust to the joy, which is weird because with everything that's going on in the world, it almost makes you feel guilty to focus on joy. And then I'm well, you had a horrible life up until recently. So maybe it's just you're due to focus on joy for a while. You just can leave the other things behind and just maybe for the rest of my life, just focus on writing about things that bring joy, not just to me, but to other people. Because talking about Keanu it just makes everyone happy, really. I feel like Keanu is my safe word. So whenever I'm in a discussion with people, and if people are getting heated, and it's politics or something, and people are disagreeing, and there's there's about to be a fight, and people are about to end their friendships, and I'm hey, so I heard this thing about Keanu, and I'm hey, did you know that Keanu, and it's always related to something that they're actually talking about, but when you redirect the conversation to Keanu, it's really amazing to watch what happens, and it really does. It is lighting some sage, and it just cleanses the whole space, and everyone chills out, and it's very effective. It's very effective. So I don't know. I feel and also I just feel whenever I talk about Keanu, he just brings me such joy that I want to be doing more things that I feel this in my body, just so happy. And so, yeah, so I always loved him and he always brought me joy, but now it's my job to talk about my joy, and it's pretty cool, actually. And I love that I let it change me because I feel it would have been easy to just go back to what I was doing before. And yeah, I've made the decision that we're not going to do that. So yeah. Thanks, Keanu.
Yeah.
I have 2 questions from our online audience that I want to see
yes,
and then
thank
we
you.
can
Wow,
wrap
online
up
audience
Q&A.
questions. Oh my god.
So Mary asks, and we might have touched on this a little bit, but if there's a variation in your answer, we will see. Mary asks, what was the biggest OMG moment of writing this book and getting ready for today's launch?
So the question was, what was the biggest OMG moment of writing the book and of today's launch? I would say the biggest was probably meeting Keanu. So I've met Keanu 4 times now, and just this past Friday, I gave him the book.
Oh.
Yes. Oh my God. I gave him the book, and it was inscribed to him, and I also gave copies to his bandmates because this was at one of Dogstar's shows because they're my favorite band. And I've been a fan of theirs since the 90s. And so, yeah, I think just, it was amazing. Like, I wasn't allowed to hand it to him directly. But when I met them, they were like, we got the books. Thank you so much. And because I've met them several times, I could just feel the difference in the vibe, like, after they got the books. And I had, like, 5 minutes to chat with Keanu about it. And he was so humble. And he was like, I've been so blessed to work with so many amazing people. And I was like, okay, yes, that's true. But sir, like, you've also made really good choices. And I could tell that he was going to kind of try and deflect again. Like, he's so humble. He really, like, he puts the credit on everyone else. And I was like, I'm not going to get into a fight with him about how great he is. And we were pressed for time. And so, to be able to, like, have presented the book to him and inscribed it to him, and then that he looked at it and we had a moment to chat about it that was, oh my God, I'm still processing that OMG moment, honestly. And I get to see him again tomorrow. And so we will find out if they say anything about my book. We don't know, to be continued.
Where will you see him tomorrow?
So his band Dogstar is playing out in Santa Rosa, and so I got tickets again because I follow them all over the place, and so I'm one of those people for Dogstar, and I got the VIP package so I can, like, have the meet and greet, and now they all know me, and also, like, they keep playing in venues where you're not allowed to dance, so I'm literally the only person dancing. So not only am I, like, the girl who wrote the book about him, but I'm also the dancing one who wears the fancy dresses, like. Well, yep, it's accurate. So they all know who I am now, which is also kind of an oh my God moment. Oh my God.
We have one last question
Okay,
for
cool.
the evening. Comes from Matthew.
All right.
If you could see Keanu play any character in any film, it can also be a novel that has not yet been adapted to a movie, which would it be and why?
Oh my gosh, this is the best question. So the question was, if I could see Keanu play any role that he's not done, and whether it's in a novel or, oh my gosh. I mean, honestly, I'm going to say Shakespeare. Like, do a Keanu Shakespeare collection. Put him in all of them. Because I know he loves Shakespeare, and I still really want people to consider Keanu to be a serious actor. And Shakespeare's a really good way to do that. And he was brilliant in Much Ado About Nothing. Like, brilliant. I mean, that's why one of the reasons I named my book Much Ado About Keanu. So yeah, Shakespeare. Everything Shakespeare. Everything. I would just give me the whole collection. And then I think I'd like to see him in, like, a Western. Because he's not really done a Western. And maybe, like, Adam Driver could play his brother or his nephew or something. There's that. And then I'm actually also working on a screenplay where he fights all of the Skarsgård family. So it's like a family drama. It's like, it's like Succession meets Gladiator. And it's Keanu and the Skarsgårds, all of them. And they're all so tall, and he's not that tall. And but they all do their own stunts. And so, so that's, that would be another dream. If I wrote the film and then he was in it, oh my God. That would be ridiculous. But so there's also that, him fighting the Skarsgårds.
I see that happening. That could totally happen.
I kind of feel like it would. Yeah. So let's, like, manifest that. Oh my God.
Well,
Awesome.
I think that might bring us to the end of our evening.
Oh, thank you guys so much. This was so lovely. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you for hosting. And thank you, Shanthi, for your amazing questions. This was so much fun. This is my first author event like this, so I just
It was a pleasure. I had
you are
so much
awesome.
fun. Thank
Oh my
you.
gosh, thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Car and Green Apple Books for hosting us. Oh, this is so cool. Thank you again.
Of course. Let's give one more hand for Sezin. Congratulations. Thank you for letting us celebrate your book.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for nerding out with us. This was fun. Shanthi, thank you for moderating and for paying such close attention. I will be brief and just let you know we have copies of Much Ado About Keanu at the front register. We also have 2 of Shanti's books at the front register. You can find them there. And we, if you want them signed,
Yes.
are you up for signing books?
Oh yes, I am. And also, so Keanu was in this film called The Gift, and there's a fortune teller in it, or she's a psychic, and she uses these cards. And so, of course, at one point I was like, I have to find out where I can get those cards. Turns out that they are special cards that they used at the beginning of Ghostbusters. In the 70s, they were using them. They were using them to like test people for extrasensory perception. And so, so if y'all like buy copies, or even if you don't, like if you'd like to pick a card, I will sign the card for you, and I can briefly read your fortune.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.